Hi, welcome to After Hours step-by-step tutorial. In today's tutorial, we'll be learning how to create a glass globe vector illustration using Adobe Illustrator. We want to start by creating our background. Navigate to our left toolbar and create a shape using the rectangle tool. We'll need it in 1800 by 1800 pixels, which is the size of our artboard. With the shape selected, let's apply a simple green gradient. Go to Gradient panel and select Linear Gradient. And apply colors in this order. We may also need to adjust the gradient direction. Simply select Gradient tool and change blending direction to vertical. Next, to add a subtle glow effect to the background, we want to make a copy of the shape. With the copy, let's go to the Gradient panel and apply Radial Gradient. Instead of green, we will be replacing both blending endpoints with white. In Gradient Slider, change opacity value to 0%. Then, select Gradient tool to increase the size of our white glow. Finally, under the Transparency panel, change Blending Mode to Overlay and set opacity at 75%. To begin building our transparent glass, let's bring up the Ellipse tool and create a 850 pixels circle. With the shape selected, apply Linear Gradient and change colors to white. In Gradient Slider, change opacity value to 0%. And apply gradient in a vertical direction. Then change blending mode to soft light and reduce opacity to 20%. Next, we are going to create a second circle that's slightly larger than this, with 900 pixels dimensions. For this circle, we want to remove fill and apply a 10-point stroke. To give the stroke a glow effect, go to our overhead menu, Effect, Blur and select Gaussian Blur. Set radius to 5 pixels. Change blending mode to overlay with opacity 50%. We will now create a third circle with 900 pixels dimensions. For this circle, we want to navigate to our left toolbar and select Mesh tool. With Mesh tool selected, let's start adding a few points on our circle to create a grid. Once we've done that, select all of the points and reduce opacity to 50%. Select the few points in the center of the circle and reduce this further to 0%. We can always adjust these points again by shifting them around until we are happy with our mesh gradient. To add light reflections on the surface, we are going to need two 900 pixels circles. Duplicate shape and shift one of them slightly to our right, so the circles are overlapped. Then, go to Pathfinder and select Exclude. This will give us two crescent shapes to work with. For the first crescent, let's remove the anchor points at the bottom and unite shape to close paths. We will do the same for the second crescent by deleting the top anchor points. Next, pull up the Rectangle tool and draw up a rectangle about this size. And apply the Exclude tool. Delete excess shape. Going back to our first crescent, apply Linear Gradient with 0 and 40% opacity. And change the direction to Vertical Blend. Moving on to our second crescent, let's apply a linear gradient as well. This time, we will need 3 points on our gradient slider with opacity value 0, 40 and 0%. Then, adjust the gradient direction. And this is done. Next, to create the platform for our glass, we are going to need a rectangle with the dimensions 510 by 20 pixels, as well as an ellipse with width 510 by 50 pixels in height. And make a copy of the shape. Delete the top anchor point for one of the ellipse. And bring this further down to merge with our rectangle. Again, make a copy of the new shape. We are now ready to add colors to our shapes. We will fill the first tier by applying linear gradient with dark and light shades of green. Select the remaining shapes and replicate gradient using the eyedropper tool. We do want to change the colors for the third tier. So let's go to the gradient panel and apply colors in this order. For our first tier, we are going to make this slightly darker by adding a tint. Duplicate shape and change gradient colors to black and white. Reduce opacity of white to 0%. Under Transparency panel, change blending mode to multiply with 40% opacity. We will do the same for the second tier. Again, make a copy. And apply gradient with eyedropper tool. Change color to black and increase opacity to 50%. Now, group them and bring them to their position. We might also need to rearrange their order. Simply right-click, select Arrange and bring to front. Moving on to our second tier, let's start by creating a rectangle with 500 by 100 pixels. And an ellipse with 500 by 50 pixels. Delete anchor point and shift this to the bottom of our rectangle. Then, unite shapes. Apply a solid green to the shape. Next, we will be adding some details to our rectangle. Create a rectangle that is 5 by 125 pixels. Apply linear gradient. Reduce opacity to 0%. Replace color with white. And change location to 75%. Under Transparency panel, set blending mode to overlay with 50% opacity. Make 2 more copies of this. And have them aligned side by side. For the second shape, let's change to a black gradient. And adjust location value to 50%. Change blending mode to multiply with 25% opacity. For the third shape, right-click, select Transform, Reflect. We want to make sure that vertical option is selected. Change color to black and set blending mode to multiply with 50% opacity. Now, let's select all three shapes, group them and make a copy. Then, align them to the edges of the rectangle. With the two selected, go to our overhead menu, Object, Blend, Blend Options, select Specified Steps, and set value to 20. Go back to Object, Blend, Make to create a repetitive pattern. Next, we are going to create a clipping mask to house our pattern. To add shadow, let's make two copies of the base. Shift this slightly upwards. Then, go to Pathfinder and minus front. Make a copy of this with 0% opacity. With both shapes selected, we will use the blending tool again to create our shadow. Then change blending mode to multiply with 75% opacity. Now, group them and bring them to their position. We can also make this portion slightly darker by adding a tint. To add shadow to the base, make a copy of this and bring it further down so it sits at the bottom. To create a larger base, let's make a copy of our first tier and increase the size to 550 pixels in width. Instead of green, we will create a gold base using our color palette. Apply linear gradient colors in this order. The color order are the same for both top and bottom with slight difference in location value. You can also use the eyedropper tool to copy the gradient. Next, we will make a copy of the shadow we've created. And also increase this to 550 pixels. Change color to green. To create a larger shadow, we will make two copies of the top layer. Again, change color to green and increase one of them to about 950 pixels wide. Change opacity to 0% for the bigger ellipse. And make blend. We might need to rearrange their order. Simply right-click and select Send to Back. Next, go to our overhead menu, Effect, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and give it about 5 pixels. To create a gold number plate for the base, we will need a rectangle with 180 by 80 pixels. Make 2 copies of the base. We will be using them to create a slight bend on our rectangle. Have one of them slightly overlap the top edges. With both shapes selected, let's do a minus front. Next, have the second copy overlap the rectangle to reveal a small portion of the bottom. Then apply intersect. And add 5 pixels to the corners. Let's go on to make 3 more copies of this shape. For our first shape, we will apply a black and white linear gradient. Change blending mode to multiply. For our second shape, we want to use the mesh tool to add a few points on our rectangle to create a grid. We can now add colors to the points using our gold color palette. Then align the 2 shapes and group them together. For the remaining shapes, we will be using them to create a shadow using the blend tool. And change blending mode to multiply with 75% opacity. Arrange them in order. And bring them to their position. We'll also be adding in a type using the font Bill Moore. This is a free-to-download typeface. If you're interested, you can refer to the link in the description below. Next, to create a bowl within the glass globe, we will need an ellipse with 880 by 880 pixels. And a rectangle with 1000 by 700 pixels. With the 2 shapes selected, let's apply minus front. We will also need an ellipse that is 710 by 80 pixels. Make a copy of the base and have it sit at the bottom of our bowl. Then apply divide. Delete these excess shapes so we are left with a nice curve for the bowl and unite them. Apply linear gradient with these colors. To create shadow, we will make additional copies of our bowl. And apply minus front. Then, copy and apply minus front again. With this new shape, we will now create the shadow. Make an additional copy and separate them with some distance. Change opacity value to 0%. And apply blend. Then, go to our drop-down menu. Under Effect, Blur, select Gaussian Blur and give it about 5 pixels. Make a copy of the base and create a clipping mask to house our shadow. Next, we will make a copy of the large shadow here. Send it to back and have it scaled down to size. We can always adjust their size, position and blending mode until we are happy with our end results. Finally, we will add a speckled effect to fill our glass globe. Bring up the ellipse tool and create circle with 10 pixels dimension. Navigate to our brush panel and click on the plus icon to create a new brush. And select Scatter Brush. We won't be changing any of these now, so let's close the pop-up and delete the circle. Next, with the paintbrush tool, draw a random path. We will use this path as reference to determine the values of our brush. Double-click on the brush we've just created to bring up our scatter brush options. Under Size option, change preference to random with variation 80 to 20%. Under Spacing option, change preference to random with variation 400 to 800%. And under Scatter option, change preference to random with variation 400 to 600%. Then select Apply to Strokes. We can now start filling our glass globe with speckled effect by drawing random paths. To add depth, select a few of the strokes and change their opacity value to 50%. We can also expand the appearance of some of these strokes to apply a Gaussian blur effect. Finally, group them up. Draw up an ellipse with 875 pixels in dimension. And create a clipping mask to house the speckled effect within our globe. That's the end of our glass globe vector illustration. And thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed the tutorial video, give it a thumbs up. And subscribe to our channel for weekly tutorials. This video is brought to you by After Hours, in collaboration with Refine Define.